Okay, good evening. This is the Auburn Finance Committee. Today's March 26, 2025. Tonight's agenda, we have a couple transfers possibly, and then we'll talk about the some budgets to come up. Yeah. Give me on some changes to the agenda, but let me first read the remote participation script for this evening. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, it's 1-786-535-3211 with an access code of 991-599-357. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/991-599-357. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. Permit me to confirm all members that are participating here. When you call any name, please respond in the affirmative. We have Michael Marshall.
Here.
Patrick Jones.
Here.
George Graham.
Here.
Stephen Consiglio.
Here.
Andrew Shah.
Here.
And town officials and employees participating, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Interim Town Manager Dory Vecchio. CFO Town Accountant Karen Harnois.
Here.
And Administrative Assistant Daniel Chamberlain Roberts.
Here.
Thank you. We don't have anybody that's appearing remotely, so we won't have to do roll call votes, so that is a good thing. So the first item on our agenda this evening is a transfer request from the fire department. Chief Coleman? And just for the record, so the one that was provided to us before the meeting listed $1 amount. There is an amended dollar amount on the transfer that we received this evening, so maybe the chief can explain the reason for the difference in the two documents.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to the committee. As I mentioned when I was here last week for my budget presentation, I informed you that I would be here tonight seeking a transfer from the training account to the firefighter salary line. I currently have one vacancy, and we will have another member retiring in the middle of February. So with the remaining balance that we have in the firefighter salary line, this transfer will allow us to bring those two members on with a start date of April 28th. I'm happy to, as I mentioned last week, just to reiterate, we were able to get two members who are currently full-time firefighters, academy trained. These are some seasoned folks. So when we bring them on April 28th, we should be able to get them brought up to speed fairly quickly, so they will count toward shift on July 1. So the intent of this transfer tonight is to do exactly that, just so we're not starting off July 1 with me behind the eight ball in terms of staffing. So I've been, as I mentioned last week, the training account, I've been still pulling money that will expire on June 30th from ARPA. That was given to us for training. So with this transfer tonight, the reason for the amendment was I was off by 1 week on the members, so it went from 8.2 to 9.2 weeks. That's the reason for the difference. Excuse me. So with the transfer into firefighter salary and then the $2,000 into the building maintenance account, which will cover some plumbing bills for both headquarters and Station 2, and then an anticipated amount, hopefully, to get us to June 30th. That will still leave me a balance of about $4,300 in the training account, but that coupled with the $5,800 that I still have from ARPA puts me somewhere around 10.2 in training, which will cover my remaining training obligations between now and June 30th. So that is the request of my transfer, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions on this one? Just for the record, Chief, so this gets those firefighters started sooner?
Not necessarily. It gives them a start date of April 28th. So they still, they haven't even, one is going Friday, one's going next week for their medical physical. They're in background right now. So by the time all of the procedural stuff shakes out, we have an expected start date of Monday, April 28th. They'll do a 1 week orientation. Then they'll move to group. and then we'll get them through their driver training, the clearing process, and then they'll be on their own on July 1. So we were very fortunate in this process. We were able to pick up 2 members, 2 seasoned career firefighters from the town of Charlton. So we're very happy to have them.
Any questions? Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve the transfer of the 20,627.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the $20,627. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous? We have a motion on the training account to the $2,000 to the building maintenance account.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good.
Thank you very much. Have a good
you.
evening.
Thank
Okay, the next transfer we have is from the DPW. Anybody from DPW? Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So do you want to go over the transfers that before us, and we'll just,
Sure, there's a few in front of you, so I don't know if you want me to just go through each of them, or?
yeah, I mean, we can just read them off. So this first one shows from the sewer division, taking $10,000 from the wages account, requested to go $5,000 from the, requested $5,000 from wages going to building maintenance, reason given, pump station electrical repairs.
Sure, so there's been a number of different repairs we've needed at a few of the stations this year, so we've sort of run up against the budget a little bit. We have some electrical upgrades that we need to do at 2 of the stations, one in particular. So we're trying to cover that before the end of the year. Our wage account has a pretty significant surplus in it because we had to budget for an additional employee at the beginning of the year that's no longer coming out of that wage account. So that account has money.
Any questions on this one?
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the $5,000 from wages to building maintenance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next one you have is also from DPW Sewer Division, coming from the wages account. Amount requested $10,000 going to the clerical account. Reason given for the transfer, a payout for a retired clerk.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This one is from the Highway Division. It is coming from the civil engineer account. Amount requested $2,000 going to the protective clothing account. Reason for the transfer, multiple new employees need clothing.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Also from the Highway Division, this one's coming from the line painting account. Amount requested $6,000 going to the sweeper brooms account.
Through the
Reason-
chair, if we could make a motion to take these 3 as one, since they are all coming from the same account. Just before we take.
Absolutely. So we have a motion to take all 3 as one. And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Do you want to discuss these? So there's $6,000 for sweeper brooms, $3,000 to building maintenance, and $5,500 to the wages account.
Great, yep. So I'll go one by one. So the sweeper brooms account, we needed to buy some new sweeper brooms. We're coming into sweeper season now. It seems to be an account that's sort of chronically underfunded, so I think we're looking at addressing that, but that would be the cost of what we expect we need to get through at least this season. Going down to the building maintenance account, there was some unexpected repairs needed for our boiler. We ended up with a $2,900 repair bill over the winter to fix our heat. And under the wages account, that was because we had a number of, we had some turnover this year and we had to pay out some employees' benefits.
Questions?
So you're taking it all from the line painting.
Correct.
So what is happening with line?
Sure. So the line painting right now, they're going through the process of putting that out to bid. There was something that came up this year as far as the technical requirements have changed in what is needed for line painting. So they had to go through a review process of that. They're going to be putting that out to bid either at the end of this fiscal year or the beginning of next fiscal year for that. And they're going to use this money for at least a portion of that, coupled with the budget for next year.
So we don't do that in-house.
The line painting? No. Some of it we do, but we do a line painting bid each year.
I guess my question is going to be similar to so it's all coming from the line painting account. Does that impact the crosswalk program that you guys are very successfully keeping the crosswalks addressed? And we have very low if.
No, that shouldn't. This will. I mean, that does come out of this account, but this is for the general road striping.
Okay. But so there's separate monies for the crosswalks that you typically maintain?
I'm not certain if that's a separate account or not, but I was not given the impression that that was affected.
No one be impacted? You don't believe that to be,
Right.
any other questions? Andrew?
I guess I would just question, so we're moving money out of the wages account on these previous numbers, but then we're moving money from the line painting into the wages. It seems counterproductive, but maybe.
Those are separate accounts. Are you referring to the sewer wages account?
The 51, with the 103, is that different than the one approved previous on the sewer division?
They're separate divisions.
Okay, so separate
it's-
accounts.
It might be the same account, but they're each budget.
Yeah, the sewer
Fair
division, it's an enterprise account. It has its own separate budget.
Yep.
So the ones coming out of the sewer wages account, it's a separate account.
Fair enough, thank you.
Yep.
Any additional questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, a motion to approve the three items coming from the line painting account, the $6,000 for the super brooms, the $3,000 for building maintenance, and the $5,500 going to wages. I have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And from the, I tried, Patrick, to see if there's a third. This is from the fleet maintenance division, coming from fleet wages, $1,000 to the fleet education account. It says training for 2 new employees.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
And this one also from fleet wages, $2,000 going to fleet supply. Reason given, higher than anticipated supply cost. We'll just get a general update. I know cost of things and,
Sure, yeah. So, the fleet supply account, that account we typically use for items that we can't assign to a specific department, like bulk purchase of oil, small parts. So that account was set up for the first time this year. So we kind of had to take a guess at how much to fund that account. As we went through the year, we realized we could allocate some of these bulk purchases to specific departments. Like if we get oil and it's mostly for DPW vehicles, okay, maybe we'll put that to DPW. Or if it's mostly for police cruisers, we'll do police cruisers. So we're kind of honing that process as to how to assign those to each division. But as it stands now, that account is running low, and we want to make sure we can get through the year. I'm not sure that this will get us all the way through the year. We're at this point with the fleet accounts, and we'll talk more on the next one as well. I'm kind of doing it piece by piece to see how far we can get, and if there's any other accounts we can take it out of as we go.
any additional questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the $2,000 for the fleet wages to fleet supply. All in favor?
all right.
And our last one is from the reserve account. This is going to fleet maintenance for reason for motor vehicle repairs, specifically police. Amount requested $10,000. Present balance on that account, $3,094.63. Reason for shortage, higher than anticipated repair needs.
All right. So, sort of as a general overview, the fleet division's accounts are split up mostly, at least the motor vehicle repair accounts are split up between DPW, fire, police, and town hall. And then there's the supply account as well. So I track those as we go through the year to see, how we project, because as you or many of you are aware, fleet maintenance costs have been getting much higher the past few years, and we've had to come back to the well several times. So as of right now, just as, again, sort of a general update, the DPW account is trending to be over budget. It is not currently over budget, but I'm tracking that. We'll probably have to come back at a future meeting to address that. But I want to see how far we get and what the balance of the other accounts are to see what we can kind of trade from within fleet before we have to start looking at the reserve account. The fire account is trending under budget by maybe about $20,000, so that could be a potential source for some of these future transfers. But at this point in the year, I wouldn't want to start taking money out of other departments' fleet repair budgets, because all it takes is one fire engine to go down and eat up all that. The police budget this year has been a pretty significant outlier compared to past years for police. They've never gone over 50,000 in a year. Last year, they did end the year at about $60,000 in repair. We are at $60,000 right now. There was a number of large repairs very early on. One particular police vehicle ended up eating up about $14,000 over the span of a few months. And that's about a third of their budget. They had a number of vehicles that had to get some engine work, a lot of tires and brakes. They're finding some of the new Tahoes that they've been buying have been going through tires and brakes more than expected. One of the issues with that, because they're newer vehicles, is we can't get aftermarket parts. We talked to our fleet mechanic. He expects we can probably start getting those types of parts later this year. So we're hoping that those costs for the Tahoes come down. They're good vehicles. It's just, at least in the opinion of our new mechanic, they do have relatively high maintenance costs. So it's something that we're looking at. But it's just been a sort of a general trend throughout the year, with a sort of a half a dozen or so large outliers as far as repairs go for police. So right now I'm requesting $10,000 out of the reserve account. I project they'll need closer to 20. I think that based off of the burn rate that we've been going in that department over the past several weeks, this will get us probably to the end of April. And at that point, we could try to evaluate, is there another internal account we can take out of, or do we need to talk about the reserve again?
Questions?
I only have a question more of how it would affect the capital improvement. We bought those, from what I understand, it's because they were cheaper, but now it sounds like they might be costing slightly more to maintain. So would we be considering looking at?
So that would be a question for the police department. I couldn't answer that. I did speak with one member of the department earlier this week just to go over fleet costs. And I did offer, he agreed it was a good idea to sit down and talk about their capital plan and see how this factors in to how they are planning to go forward with these vehicles. Because we want to make sure that, like you said, that's being factored in. But I can't speak to their capital improvement plan other than that.
My question relative to that is, we hear probably every year at town meeting, there's always someone that brings up the question of the size of the police department's fleet. And we know the older cruisers are used for secondary purposes, whether it's construction details or other needs. And the explanation of the frontline fleet was very good, in that they try and keep the miles down, and they're only used so many times, shifts, so that they're not run 24/7. But there's always the questions is the number of vehicles. And while I understand the concept, I also realize that there is a maintenance to keep any vehicle running, whether it's oil changes or you mentioned tires and things of that nature. Based on the costs of maintenance now, and the fact that you're tracking things much better with the new software, will those discussions happen as to when it doesn't make any sense to keep a vehicle under any circumstances, even if it's a secondary vehicle, or, does it have a timeline for which point it transitions over to a DDIS vehicle or another town employee vehicle to be used for other purposes, as opposed to having it on the lot at the police station? So I don't know if you can bring that up, or if any of these costs.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and it's something that we've talked about. So now that we have the ability to track these costs better, and it was actually very helpful when I was preparing for this meeting, being able to look back and go through the software that we're using, see which vehicles have been recurring issues, and see those total costs. That is something that we've talked about with the police department, and it is something that I expect will factor into their decision making, although I can't speak to how they would make final determination, because it would be up to them as far as what their needs are. But I expect that these conversations will become more frequent as we continue to get more data on these vehicles. I do know that when it is time for a vehicle to retire, they get terrible auction values. So it is nice to be able to use them internally for other things. We've used retired police vehicles for our custodian vehicle, for example, and we're also keeping a number of police vehicles right now in the DPW yard to help with parts, so that we can strip parts and use them for other repairs to try to save cost, because there seems to be more of a value in that than just getting $2,000 for a cruiser at auction. So those are the types of things that we're looking at. But that's probably a better joint discussion between us and police as far as how they want to, make those decisions.
And I guess I would just follow up on that is, I understand that, but you're ultimately from DPW, from the fleet division, having to come before the finance to ask for additional funds coming out of the budgets that are assigned under yours, as opposed to if it was a police or fire budget item for their fleet, they may be making decisions a little bit differently, is kind of my point. So I'm glad those discussions are happening behind the scenes, and I hope, town administration sort of has to be the intermediary between those two discussions for two departments as to what is our cost value to a vehicle, whether it's worthy of retaining, or should it be moved on to another division, another department, or just removed from, sent off to auction and save, instead of sending more money towards a vehicle.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that I can say, I believe there's been excellent communication and coordination between DPW and police. We've been, I try to have regular check-ins with them, how's it going, how's fleet, are we meeting your needs? And we did, at the last time we met, we did talk about that type of thing, looking at the lifespan of these vehicles, these new Tahoes, for example, how the repair costs might affect those, that kind of thing. And I think wrapping those conversations into their capital planning is something that will be very beneficial.
Thank you.
Are you involved at all in like all of the departments when they're purchasing vehicles, the discussions about how they decide how to spend capital? Because if you're not, like, how do we make that happen? Because it seems like a significant cost to the town every single year is vehicle maintenance. I'm going to guess you probably have a better idea of what the long-term maintenance cost of a particular vehicle would be than like the treasurer collector when he's deciding which car to buy to drive around town. So I'm just, as an idea, like if this isn't something that's happening on a regular basis as part of capital planning, it seems like it should be, because it seems like if we're not taking it into account when we're purchasing the vehicles, all we're really doing is spreading the cost out over longer periods of time, and or making bad financial decisions by buying a vehicle that might cost a little bit less in year one and significantly more in year 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it's worth reviewing the process. We are not typically involved in purchasing vehicles for other.
And I'm not trying to give you more work, but also I am trying to give you more work. So.
Appreciate it. A good example of what you're talking about is the move towards electric vehicles, and it's something that I support. But there are significant maintenance implications to that we just simply haven't had the conversations about. And it's one of those things that I think it's worth having those types of maybe coordination meetings. So I think it's a good point.
Just to build upon Michael's point is, if in theory, if we all were in the same models of vehicles, if one was to go down, in theory, you could maybe part some of that vehicle and use it for parts on other vehicles, or, all your oil filters on the shelf are all, as opposed to having tires for 12 different cars and oil filters and other parts. Just a consideration for long-term.
How many different models do we have?
Oh, I don't have that in front of me. It's
Not even heavy equipment, but like, regular, like a car that any of us could buy and drive around. Approximately, how many would you guess we have?
I'd hate to just throw out a number. At the DPW, I can say we were standardized on heavy vehicles, internationals. They started, they essentially stopped producing those a couple of years ago. So we switched to another manufacturer, Western Star. We're pretty standardized on the F-250s and 350s, so a lot of the Ford parts. We do have a handful of older Chevys. And I do agree that there's value in standardization as far as some of those models. But there's also something to be said for, not being locked into one manufacturer forever. Things change, those calculations change. So it's something that we talk about definitely internally at DPW as far as town-wide. I know that police tend to standardize on a vehicle, and every once in a while that standard changes. For example, the switch to the Tahoes. And that's fine, as long as they're continuing buying the same model. But there is a pretty wide variety in age to the fleet. So with that age comes sort of naturally different standards, different sizes, different models. Yeah, I mean, we're not involved town-wide as far as capital planning for vehicles, but
Not yet.
it's not a bad suggestion. I agree. I will say that the town does have a large fleet, and we buy vehicles every year, and the process is very cumbersome already. Not to say that adding a step is a bad idea, but yeah, no, it's a good suggestion.
And I'm sorry, like, to interrupt. If each department is going through its own, like, separate procurement process to decide which vehicle best suits its needs, despite the fact that I'm sure that many of these departments have extremely similar needs, because, like, the town, the guy who goes out and does building inspections and the guy who goes out and does property inspections for tax valuations, like, they're both essentially just driving around town. It doesn't seem like that's a wildly different use case, and maybe I'm drastically oversimplifying it, but I agree adding steps is never good, but if we could maybe make all of the steps that are happening in different departments happen at the same time in the same place, I think that would also potentially be helpful. Yeah. And I know that you're not in a position to say yes or no, so I appreciate you just nodding along and thank you, but yeah.
Any additional questions on this one? I know we got a busy night. I want to.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the $10,000 from the reserve account for the motor vehicle repairs. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
So we move right into our operating budgets. Do we want to take these out of order since we have some guests here? Do you want to go? No, we'll go right to this. Will be a quick one. We'll go to our on the finance department budget. Some changes, and interim town manager can explain that. This is one that we saw previously, but we have some adjustments to make on this one.
Yes, thank you so much. We submitted last week an adjustment to the treasurer's office budget, which I discussed with you a couple weeks ago. In further conversations with the chief financial officer and the current treasurer collector and the assistant treasurer collector, the issues that they were discussing weren't necessarily the level of an entry-level employee. The work was not that level. There are issues, and I know Karen can elaborate, but they are issues associated with dealing with banks and solving problems with banks and balancing and statements and things like that that are not the lower level employee. So I do not have the money to add a position like that full-time for the whole year. So I took the money that we originally discussed that I was putting in for a lower level, and we'll hire that person in October so that we will have that person on. They'll be able to help. I'm working with Karen to talk to the current treasurer collector who is retiring soon to come back and help as needed in case we need any help in that interim. So the change before you is not a change in dollars, it's a change in title. And while it was still going through finance, I wanted to have that conversation and update with you on that.
Okay, so the change in title is, I don't have the old one in front of me.
It's a new assistant position,
Okay.
estimated for 35 weeks instead of 52.
Patrick?
I had a question.
Yeah, please.
What you find. Through the chair to the interim manager, I'm curious if the decision-making that you're referring to is going to conflict with policy or decisions that really should not be housed by more than one person, so that we're not making cash disbursement or other types of decisions that really need to be kept close to the CFO or the treasurer in the effect that they're not going to change a process that could, create a problem down the road? Is there a very clear, because you had mentioned that there's communication with the bank and so forth, and I would think that possibly you would impose a process that would make clear the clerical portion and then a hierarchy of expectations so that if something needed to be vetted before it got changed, that the treasurer or the CFO would be aware of that.
It's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. There is a clear delineation in duties with this new position. It is currently splitting the current assistant that we have, who's an assistant treasurer collector. One will be an assistant collector, one will be an assistant treasurer, working directly under the treasurer collector and the chief financial officer. So there's a separation of duties that we need to see in our financial world, but there's also a very clear delineation, if you want to elaborate some more. No,
Great, thank you.
thank you.
Additional questions?
Ask, did you say, so this is a permanent new position, or is it just temporary until, you said someone's retiring soon? It's just a kind of,
So someone is retiring. Our town treasurer collector is retiring June 20th. So with that retirement, I have been working with the current assistant treasurer collector to talk about the challenges in the office. There's a lot that's gone on in just the few years that I've been here in that office, a lot of additional work. And when we first talked, we were talking about the window. The window's really a very difficult job. I was under the impression that that would help solve they do have backlog, they do have work that needs to be done. But in further conversation with the chief financial officer and that department, it is less the front window and more of the technical things that need to be focused on and resolved because they're constant right now. So we are also developing policy throughout the town that will mitigate some of this because there's, for instance, credit card machines. Sometimes you'll get a department that goes and does it on their own. Well, they're not allowed to do that anymore. Like there's things that there'll be additional processes developed, but with these two positions, the workload will be much more manageable and it's a higher level position, but it is permanent and they will start in October and finish out the year. Originally, it was a full-time position for the whole year.
So my question is, so on the amended budget we have here, it's so over, well, the total for the finance department hasn't increased, am I correct?
That is correct.
Of 46, about $45,000, is that?
46,000, yes.
Correct.
So where have we made adjustments elsewhere? So we're tight, very tight, right? Where is
Yes.
that, where are we making our adjustments to stay within our original lines?
I do believe you weren't here for that meeting. Now that I remember now, you weren't here for that meeting. So a couple weeks ago, I came in under the realization that we had an issue we need to solve in the treasurer's office. The surplus when we had a surplus of approximately 29,000 when we first brought the budget to you for review. I used that balance and I also begged our DPW director, who's not here, who has allowed me to use a one-time deduction from her roadway improvements because we just got notice from the state that the Chapter 90 is going up to $1 million. So for 17,000 that I'm borrowing for a one-time, try to get this through and balance the budget and fix this need, what I did learn through her, she was gracious to help me and help resolve the problem, was that the $1 million that we're getting from the state is amazing. 17,000 that I may borrow really isn't a lot of roadway. It is a priority for us because obviously it's a priority for the state as well. But this need is extremely important to ensure the effective functionality of that department. They've really had a tough time in the past couple of years.
Additional questions?
just ask, like, what kind of new work have they added? Like, you say their workloads increased, it sounds like a lot. Just
Sure.
because,
Nope.
working in small businesses
Great
for us,
question.
it's, department's busy. It would always be nice to hire a new
Yeah.
person in a new position, but it doesn't always work that way.
I agree.
I do have a detail of some of the additional duties that were added on. There is an increase in the online payments, which we had talked about before. We have several departments with the dog licenses and town clerks and upstairs in DDIS with permits. And now the fire department is also going to be coming on with their permits. And then there's talk of other departments as well. So we were able to separate them out now, but there's still a lot that extra balancing and reconciling that they have to do because of that. And just some other areas that they need to attend to is, say, preparing correspondence to taxpayers and to the financial entities, their tax title demands, and they also work with the school on the student activities and school lunch that we had to put into. We had to do some additional work on that this year because we had to put some school lunch into some different accounts. And just the amount of bank transfers has increased. And they also deal with financial activity on the ambulance. So there's really a lot that they deal with. And just the amount of the workload has increased. So they really need they need some additional support just to keep up with their usual activities.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I've noticed since I've been here, which is definitely a concern for me as interim town manager, is people should be able to go on vacation and come back and do their work to catch up, not take months to catch up. And we're going to lose people in this particular department. I would not ask for it without that. I am concerned about still not losing people, but I think with this and the trust they have in me and you, that we'll be able to maintain our current staffing, and knowing that this person's coming out on in October, and knowing that the current department head or division head will be able to help us in that time in between.
Just to be clear, so we're adding a half a person? Is that what it nets out to be?
It's less, it's a little more than a half a person. It will be a full person that starts in October versus July 1st.
I think I may have missed the vote, but to be clear, we already approved this money.
Yes.
We're just moving it from a full-time, full-year clerical position to a full-time, 3/4 of the year assistant collector or
Yes.
treasurer or whatever it is position, essentially to better, like, we've already approved an extra body in this office. We're just moving it from one line item to another line item. And I'm not trying to dismiss that. It will be more expensive in every following year because this is only 3/4 of their salary, but this isn't new money. It's new from the original budget, but we already approved the amended budget. And this also isn't like a new body. It's just a reclassification of what we need.
No, but I just also want to interject, but it's also a change of title from clerical to supervisory or managerial. So that does make a significant impact to us. And I just wanted to mention, because you mentioned the computer part of this, which is fairly new. And that's actually a really good example, because if you are still tweaking it, I just want to make sure that the individual that's taking this role is aware that there might be a certain point that they may realize a dilemma, but not be accountable to fix it, but to elevate it.
Right. No, I understand that, definitely. I also would like to say that the program that we're using, I hate to say that's causing some of these problems, is one of the most used programs. It's OpenGov in government. A lot of municipalities use it. I am going to attend a meeting, most likely after the budget process, and the new fiscal year, to talk about expanding that to some of our other departments, because on that level, it's extremely effective. And then all of our records will be in one place. It's a great software program, but when it comes to the banking side of it, it's extremely difficult.
I could just interject, I want to agree and support what the town manager is saying. When OpenGov created their software, they have a very end-user, user-friendly, great system for anybody who's home working. But what happened was when they affiliated themselves with a bank, it became a proprietary situation. So I have no problem, it's on public, millions of municipalities are using, they're aligned with Stripe. And so therefore, if I were the CFO or I were in the treasurer's role, and I said, well, I think that's great, I want to investigate, is the chief finance person to run this, I'd like to investigate a couple of areas. I can't do that because I can only work with Stripe. So even though I'm sitting here and I understand all of that, I wanted to share it with you, that it is a relatively complex situation. They are forced, their arm is being forced, and there are a lot of challenges. So again, OpenGov at the time have come out from a user and operational perspective and given us a lot of municipalities a wonderful product, but there's still some work on the back end, and we as a municipality do not have any control to better that for ourselves because of the relationship that they've developed with the the Stripe, the corporation that's called Stripe. We can't go somewhere else. And so I'm supporting this for that reason, but that's why I asked my questions, because I want to make sure that they're not going to end up doing something in a that the person taking this role, it's very clear that, they've got to know when to elevate and when to break. That's all. Sure. But I'll make a motion to,
Andrew had one more question, I believe.
Just a point of clarity, you said the retirement is in June of next year, 26, or June of 25?
June 25.
So you're not really adding a body to your next year's budget?
Until October.
Until
Because
October.
of funding,
Yeah.
as you know, going through the budget, we just do not have the money to do this. So we are we're adding a body, but we're also fixing a problem that will make the department run more effectively and more efficiently to have a better product for our residents, but also a better working environment for our employees. So it's sort of a balance, and we are going to have requirements for this department, and they need to meet deadlines and will be held accountable like everyone else. We're not passing out positions, as you know, and I'm sure you'll hear after I leave up here, some positions are cut, and we take that very seriously. So right now, we're adding this position, almost a body, but we'll see next year, and hopefully it works out for the best for all of us.
Thank you. Someone want to make a motion on this one?
motion to approve.
Do we have to phrase this one a little bit differently, though?
Well,
That's-
motion to approve the changes in the title.
Second.
Motion to approve the amended and the explanation made in the
changes.
title as,
It's not to the dollar amount, it's to the because it's the change. I would reword that to say, motion to recommend the transition between the line items and the correction in the title.
okay, we have a motion.
Second.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Norfolk Agricultural, number 303. Karen, you going to take this one for us?
Yes, I will. At Norfolk Aggie, currently we have 2 students that are attending, and we have to pay the tuitions and the transportation. So the budget increase that shows in here at the 9.8% is just based on the increase in the tuition and the increase in transportation. However, the school has notified us that there are 2 other students that have applied but have not received their notification of acceptance. So this budget may have to come forward in the fall for some additional funds if any additional students are accepted into the program.
I just want to request that the budget going forward, I'm going to work with this one, but other people that come to us with regional schools break out their transportation. It's not broken just into one number. So if there's a way to get a line item or a description as, as to what portion of this overall is transportation, that would be great.
I actually can do that in the future, but I can tell you that approximately 30,000 is for transportation, and then the 66.5 is for the tuition. But yes, we can.
I'm sure there's a reason, but the department request was initially 87, 89. Is that just because we fill in last year's number first and then adjust once we know the actual assessment?
Correct. And then we got some numbers on the tuitions that were better than.
Motion to approve?
I think just additional questions. Anybody else? I mean, does everybody understand how this comes to be that if we, do you want to explain if we don't have this program within our offerings, we're required to, and maybe the superintendent can sort of, I don't want to use the wrong terminology. It's, because if we see it back, with potentially 2 more students. Thank you, Dr. Chamberlain.
Yes, if there is something programmatically that we cannot offer. So Norfolk Aggie has a very specific type of programming, right, related to animal care and agriculture and those kind of things. Not anything that we have anything remotely close to. So therefore, we are required to then provide the students with this opportunity,
As well as transportation.
as well as transportation.
And in the past, we've worked or attempted to work with other municipalities in our area to.
Yes, we do. We group together. So they still tend to use van-type transportation, right? So you can't fit 40 kids, nor would you want to, right? Because they're so geographically kind of separated. But we do work with other communities to offset the cost.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion to recommend?
We have a motion to recommend the budget amount of $96,500. And do we have a second, Patrick?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Next budget to look at is Department of Public Services, the Library Division, number 541.
Just say yes.
You're displaced temporarily.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Are you going to have some introductions?
Yes. So I would like to introduce all of you to our new library director, Michael Zeller. He started mid-January and took over from my interim duties as head librarian, thank God. I did the budget. The reason I'm here is I did the budget. When he came on, we were just finalizing the budget. So I wanted to be a support for him and also answer any questions you may have. But since he's gotten here in January, he hit the ground running. He is well aware of all of our staffing concerns and issues. And he has done a great job to build relationships within our community. He comes from Shrewsbury. He's got several years in the Shrewsbury Public Library. He can speak more to himself if you have any questions. But I wanted to come up here and at least introduce you. So the library there was a transition last year. I joined the library as interim in October of 2024. And I handed over the keys to Michael in mid-January. Through that time, we have had some staffing changes, brought on a library associate, another library associate resigned, had a great opportunity in Gardner. And currently, we have a new library associate that Michael's just hired and a youth librarian that was something the Board of Trustees has been talking about for years. And one of the first things that Michael realized, and he can speak about it, that's starting, I think, in April. So I will allow him, I don't know if he has anything to say, but there's a lot going on there. We are still talking about the library expansion. We're trying to solve, building issues. I am going to tell you, we may be back in front of you at some point in fiscal year 26, 7, most 6, yeah, sorry, 6. Because we do have a long-term staffing issue with someone who is out for a severe health issue. That just came up in the last month. Michael is doing his best to mitigate that. It is a manager, so it's a huge impact. We are working within the current staffing that we have now to train people in supervisory skills, number one, working with the union, because some of them are union members, to, make sure the communication's open. And I do believe Michael has changed his hours to try to accommodate this change. So we may be back in front of you next year to see, we might have to bring in one of his requests, which is the reference librarian. We might need to bring that person on sooner depending on what the timeline is for this individual. But that's my piece for the library. If you guys haven't been there, you need to go and see it. It's an amazing place. It's my new love in Auburn. I miss it. Just walking in there is just such a happy place. I miss it so much. But do you have anything you want to?
I'll just reiterate what Dory said, very similarly to what she mentioned about the Treasurer's Department. When I came on board, I was fairly concerned at the library's staffing level. As I've understood it, the library has been understaffed for some time. And like the point Dory made, when we have somebody go on vacation in the library, that is an enormous staffing problem. That's how lean things are. And particularly in managers, people who can supervise others, who can open the building, close the building, which is why I've been making it a priority to add a few more of those individuals to our staff, both this year and presumably over the next few years as budget allows. Of course, as Dory mentioned, this has been somewhat upset by the fact that one of our managers is now out for what will likely be quite a while. But that being said, I still think the recommendation from the town manager for our budget will be a pretty good fit for us this year if we're able to make that happen.
Questions?
So I have one question. So there's some new positions, but there's also like an assistant director position that has traditionally been there, but not. It's only funded at 5,000. Is that becoming like a stipend for an existing position? Go ahead.
So when I put that in there because I wanted to give him the leeway of that option. When he first started and we were trying to finalize the budget, he was focused on properly staffing it, and I didn't want to remove that position. So it's not a stipend. It may be someone he decides to hire at the very end of the year, or we may come before you for a transfer to move that to the reference librarian. I wanted to make sure that he's able to make his staffing determinations the way he needs to, so I left it in there.
I will just say, like, my only concern is there are two fully new positions, right? One is half year, one's full year, and then leaving this assistant sort of there as a fillable item for later potentially leads to like 3 new managerial positions, which may absolutely be necessary. I have no idea. I won't pretend to have any idea what it takes to run the library. But I'll just say that does make me a little nervous for next year's budget, honestly, because if we come in with all 3 of those positions fully funded for next year, that's going to be a pretty significant increase to the overall library budget. So, yeah, I'll just leave it there. I don't think that's something that we can ultimately answer tonight, but.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit to that. Like Dory said, it was a little bit challenging because we had kind of had to put this budget together while I was finding my footing. And, ideally, I wanted to come up with kind of a multi-year staffing plan that we could roll out. But even just right from the get-go, it was very clear that we needed staff like immediately. Going forward, I will likely try to project out a little bit further with things. The oops, did we lose? Oh, no. Okay. I thought the microphone went dead for a second. The structure of the Auburn Public Library coming on board was very different from what I was used to experiencing in other libraries. And I've done a lot of work with our network and within the New England region. So I'm kind of familiar with the more typical library staffing plan. So the reality is that we do just need more managers. Ideally, there's sort of specific buckets that staff break down to in a more traditional library, and we don't really have any of that right now. So we need to, I'm focusing on creating those divisions, and then each of those divisions will need a supervisor to oversee the staff within. So I don't know if I will be hiring an assistant director, because my focus at the moment is more the mid-level managers. But there is a chance that we will need at least one more of those, although I would probably project that out a little bit. We can probably get by for now with the budget as recommended.
Taking into account the fact that someone will likely be out for a significant portion of the year.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot of,
You have two of them out right now.
oh, that's true. Yeah, it's there, one is unexpected, but there is a planned outage. So actually at present, I have no managers. That's why, as Dory said, it's my schedule has gotten a little loopy the last few weeks. But we will have somebody joining us in April. Yeah, it's very difficult to say what's going to happen with that individual, and we will need a body in the building at some point to cover for that person.
So my question to you would be, and we're looking at numbers here, right? And
Sure.
folks that may be paying attention or watching from home who see, the number for the budget, and how do we justify the number? So do you have anything, and I know you're new to the position, so I'm not expecting you to put
Sure.
stuff out, but do we have number of visitors this year compared to last year, number of books checked out, number of programs offered, what type of programs do you have? Just something that can help support, other than the numbers part, what are you actually seeing for usage for the facility?
Sure. I mean, it's tough for me to say, having only been here for 2 months, but I will say, in general, library statistics overall, library statistics are trending upward from across all libraries to a significant degree. So every library is looking to add staff just because usage is increasing. And looking at just some of the overall financial issues going on in our country right now, with the recession back in 2008, there was an enormous spike in library usage around that point that hasn't really come down. So, depending upon how some of the financial tumult that's happening right now plays out, I would assume there will be an extreme increase of library usage nationwide going forward.
I guess I would just ask personally, and we've asked of other departments too, just think about for next year, track how many
Oh, yeah.
bodies have come through the door, how many
Yeah.
programs you've offered, how many people have attended those programs, how many kids have used youth have used the children's section and the youth library, just to justify.
Sure, yeah. So we actually have to, libraries as a body have to compile what's called an ARIS report that we submit to the state every year that tracks all of those numbers. And we need to do that in order to get our statewide accreditation, which is where we get a lot of our statewide funding from.
Maybe that's a good
We
point.
can forward that to you, because it was done in October. It's done in October of every year, so we can actually forward that to you so that you can see it.
Yeah.
I think we've been asking for other departments as well, just,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
presentations that are
Yep.
made to have stuff like that readily available.
Absolutely.
It's,
Absolutely.
We're in agreement with the stuff you presented, but we want to be able to, for the
Sure.
taxpayers to know that.
Absolutely.
These are the reasons why we supported these numbers.
Sure.
And can you just briefly explain, either yourself or Karen or town manager, the state aid component? You just mentioned that statistics go to that state.
Yeah, so libraries receive a portion of aid based off of population size every year, and one of the major components to secure that is to submit that report. The library also has to spend a certain amount on circulating materials, so that's why you'll see we have a very one of the larger numbers on this sheet is the library material budget, which we have to spend that amount on library materials in order to secure that state aid. We also have to be open a certain number of hours. That's why even if we don't have managers, we can't like temporarily close the library in the evenings, because if we're not open in the evenings, we could lose that state aid. As I understand it, obviously there's been a lot of changes on the federal level as how money is appropriated, but all of our state aid, that's not money from the federal government to the states, that's money from the state to individual libraries, so that should not be impacted by any of the federal cuts that are taking place.
And just building project, I'm sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, not that we're going to really get into the conversation because we're going to stick to your operating budget, but in going over these budgets, he's had a look at his CIP budget as well. So he's familiar with what is out there for that at the moment.
Yes, I don't believe we have anything in our CIP.
Whereas there is.
10,000 for
Yeah.
electrical mapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is, we left, that's in there. We did not do a full CIP this year. We do have the expansion that we've been meeting and discussing. There are a lot of issues and concerns associated with that particular expansion. It's not in our CIP, it's mostly funded through donations. So we are currently working on that with DPW and with Nault Architects on the design and the cost.
So no, my question was more that he is just getting his, this is month 3 of that, and he's probably overwhelmed with so many things going on. I just wanted to at least pose the question that he's aware that he's got one out there.
Oh, he does. He knows. He knows. There's also IT. I don't know if you talked to IT yet, but they went for a grant for the library to try to, one of the things that I saw when I was there, and I had talked to Michael about it, is for the expansion, what are we going to do with the library? If we have to close it, can it be during the summer where we can maybe move the library staff with the youth to the schools? And one of the grants that IT recently wrote, and hopefully we hear about it any day, is to get laptops so that they can be mobile and work at any location. So they can go to the school department with their library assigned laptop and do work and have programs. So hopefully that comes to fruition. Right now, there's just basic desktops, but that grant would really help us move forward and be a little bit more flexible and moving around.
Just on, the plan would be to have the librarians from the library help support the school system in some way in that? Is that what, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood
No,
that.
so there is a capital project that we're working on with the library, and it's funded through donations, and it's part of the Goddard Park.
I'm really sorry. I just want to interrupt for 1 second because
Sure.
I do think this is an important thing to say out loud. That expansion is 50% funded by the town and was a town meeting, had to be
Oh, was it?
approved.
Okay, thank you.
And the reason it's 50% funded by the town is because it is primarily, the other 50% comes from the Pappas Foundation.
Yes.
And just something that I know, because in the interest of full disclosure, my wife is on the library board of trustees, is that there have been discussions about that project sort of generally. And I just want to put on the record here that like my understanding at the time that town meeting approved the 50% of that funding, which was about $500,000, was that the bridge that is being built and the expansion of the library both had to occur
Yes.
in order for Pappas to sort of put that funding out there. And so I obviously we are extremely appreciative of the money from the Pappas Foundation, but I don't want to like undersell the fact that the town is contributing 50%. It had to go to town meeting. There was a special warrant item and everything else.
Thank you. So, like I was saying, it's part of a Goddard Park project, which is what you were saying is funded through town meeting warrant and donations. The donation part I thought was mostly the library part, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's the same funding. And it is what would you call it? Right now, it's designed as a glass, what's it called?
A sunroom,
It's a Brady room. Right now, we're actually looking at the feasibility of that because it involves a lot of different aspects in the library, but it also, the upgrade will include a fire suppression system in our library, which we do not have, and it's full of books, an alarm system that needs to be upgraded. It will involve bringing in a water pipe from Southbridge Street into the building for the fire suppression system. It would push out the whole backside of the library, the part that is on the Goddard Park side, into a large Brady room. We are looking at the feasibility of the Brady room because of the sun, and we have some concerns about that, but we're still moving forward. We have Nalt Architect we've been working with, and it's all tied into the Goddard project, which I just met on today, and hopefully they are going to come back out to get that bridge up and placed where it needs to be, because we have the current permits from the state to do it. So that should be done hopefully sooner rather than later. We also have within that project is some work around the missile that's there. But I had a discussion about that missile again today, and we'll see. I think there's some great things that are going to happen in Goddard Park, and it'll be a place where everyone wants to go and enjoy the outside and enjoy the water there and have lunch and go in the library. And I think it'll be a great place for kids and adults alike.
Any additional questions?
I'll just touch on like what Kevin said. First of all, my kids have been to programs at the library. It's great. They love it. So just kudos there. But yeah, like Kevin said, I think stats would help justify, like, from 2024 to now, it's up almost 50%, the budget. So just to be able to see why it's up that much. Again, maybe the visitations are way up where it's totally justified. I think it would help.
If I can, George, I'll speak to this. It's not the stats that's up. The library was understaffed to a point that it applied a lot of pressure to the current staff there. Severe amount of pressure. People couldn't be out, they couldn't take vacations, they couldn't take personal time, there was no work-life balance. That is not a situation any town employee should ever have to work in. So it's not as much the numbers, although I do agree with you 100%, we should have brought the numbers. It is more the environment and the structure that Michael is bringing now to look at how the library is actually structured so that it's more structured like most libraries, where you would find a reference librarian, or you'd actually have a children's librarian that's running the children's programs. So it's just going to be more of something that you would find in any other town. Unfortunately, we didn't have that before. We've always had a great library, don't get me wrong, especially our youth programs were always amazing. But I think you're just going to see a different structure now that is more like other libraries.
And I'll just add to George's, and I was amazed over the past years when it's discussed what library professionals are required for degrees. And are those state requirements, or those your own requirements that, and maybe just explain what kind of degrees. So this is not a, just maybe.
Yeah, so typically, for somebody to hold the rank of librarian in really any library, you're usually required to have an advanced degree, which is usually a Master's of Library Science, sometimes a Master's of Library and Information Science. And then, obviously, to bring people like that into an organization, it's more money to justify the degree. So most of the positions that I'm hiring or looking to hire are going to be more degreed positions, because they're people coming on board with that schooling, with that experience, with that background. They're able to do more than like an entry-level position.
Thank you.
Also, just to pile on what Dory was saying, we had to do a transfer of like some pretty significant money into the library account this year to pay people out for unused time because they weren't able to take time for significant periods of time over the last few years. And like a big reason for the jump in the appropriation from, 3 years ago prior to now is the increase in salaries that were all done essentially to make these people paid like equitably for the positions that they were in, because in addition to being understaffed, we also were underpaying people in those positions. So I completely agree. We obviously want to be fiscally responsible, but the vast majority of the increases that have happened over the last 5 years have been in the salary section, and that's just to both adequately staff and adequately pay the staff of the library. As far as I can tell, like the actual budget for expenses in the library has gone up very little since fiscal year 2022. And the fact that they're able to do anything with the amount of money that we give them is fairly impressive, so.
Yeah, I'll just say, as far as stats go, that would help too, is just seeing like other towns, that other towns, similar size, similar visitation stats, they have this many, employees there. That would help too, just show people, we don't, like the fire department, shows, local community studies where we're running a minimum of 9. Most towns the same size, same call volume, minimum is 11. Studies like that, just help to justify.
Yep.
Good point, George. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell him to watch the finance committee when the fire chief was here last week and tell him to prepare the same type of thing, because I heard about that.
Yeah.
It's exciting homework right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair, I just want to coattail off his point. Salaries, are a bulk of this, but what I find interesting is when I look at your contracted services and your computer services, hardly any change, and we know contracts and a lot of utilities and stuff are going up. So it's really a two-part question. One is, are these contracted services that are in this line they're rooted right into the library, so they fall in this budget, but are there other services that the town provides in another part of the budget that affect the library?
We do use some of the state grant, is it the state grant? Is that
Right.
what it's called? The appropriation?
Oh, state aid.
The state aid
Yep.
to also supplement this budget, yes.
That's, okay, thank you.
Any additional questions on this one?
Do we have to vote on the entire public services budget or just this division?
It's this division.
I believe this one,
It's just this division.
it's broken. I thought too there was going to be a total, but when I look back, it looks like there was
I think it's the
subtotal.
759.
It's the 759, I believe.
Right.
Is the,
I'll make a motion to approve the 759, 716 town manager recommendation.
Second.
motion is second. All in favor?
Recommend.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next up is Bay Path.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Schofield. I'm the business manager at Bay Path. So I think that everybody has a copy of the presentation just to walk through. So just to begin with, some of our funding sources from Chapter 70 and 71. Estimates are based on the governor's budget that was submitted in January of 2025. So the estimated Chapter 70 funding for FY26 is $14,565,806. Estimated Chapter 71 funding for FY26 is $1,375,375. And just as a reminder, these are preliminary estimates subject to change as the governor's budget rolls out and is approved or has some amendments. So what is the impact on Bay Path? So for Chapter 70 is $112,194 increase. And for the minimum contribution by our 10 towns, it's an increase of $388,016 and an increase for net school spending of $500,210. Some of the financial information, the FY26 total budget for assessment is $30,298,721. Just want to let people know that member towns' assessments are at a minimum. There's no increase over the minimum contribution this year. The budget also includes debt service assessment of $1,552,003. Our operational budget does not require municipal funds above minimum contributions by member towns. Totaling for member assessments collectively is $13,665,798. Some other financial information, although assessments are at the minimum, it is important to note that the required minimum contributions that each town must contribute have increased collectively by $388,016. Member town transportation assessment has increased by $345,176 due to a decrease in regional transportation reimbursement funds. The district has allocated $260,531 in E&D funds to partially offset an even higher increase for FY26. Just kind of a reminder here, some of our Chapter 70 revenue is $14,565,806. School choice assessment is $293,789. Chapter 71 busing aid, $1,375,375. We are going to be using $75,000 from E&D to continue to fund our OPEB liability. It had been $50,000 in years prior. We've increased it to $75,000 over the past couple of years. In FY24, the district missed its net school spending by $660,595. The FY26 budget contains an appropriation of $500,000 from E&D to reduce that shortfall. The overall budget summary, Chapter 70, like I said, is the $14,565,806. School choice assessment, $293,789. Assessment minimum contributions, $11,613,795. Fiscal, this is something new in our budget. We have put some of our funds into different interest accounts. So we have $150,000 interest earnings for this year in the budget. The OPEB transfer of $75,000. And then the E&D net school spending gap from previous years, $500,000. So overall, as you can see, our annual budget for FY26 is $30,298,721. Some of our highlights to this budget are we're going to be adding a new diesel vocation program with 2 instructors. We have most recently, this fiscal year, just recently hired one of the diesel instructors to kind of get that program up and running. We also applied for a capital skills grant that is being used to make the space available and get all the equipment needed to have the diesel program up and running as of September. We've also added 10 part-time student summer positions. These are going to be kids working from the different vocations as minimum wage positions to kind of keep them fluid from their co-op opportunities in their different vocations. We're going to be adding a vocational instructional coach. Last year, we added an academic instructional coach, and we've seen tremendous gains from that with teachers having to meet some certain criteria, evaluations being done. So we're going to also do that for the vocational instructors this year. We are able to meet all of our contractual wage increases for all employees. Our health insurance, we have an 18% increase. In talking to some of our colleagues, we found that this is kind of the industry standard this year. Increase in health insurance is going up for many areas. We are part of a consortium for this, and over the past 6 or 7 years, there's been minimal increase. So we have all the kind of sending towns have asked this consortium to, in the future, make sure we do a small increase versus no increases. We don't hit with an 18,000 increase in future years. We're going to be having continued use of our SOA funds to provide significant professional development to all staff, especially programs focused on social, emotional issues of students. And also the SOA funds provide programs and speakers to students to address issues such as bullying, bias, mental health, and more. We've also been able to have funds to make sure that our supplies and material accounts with inflation is being met. And then some of our shop equipment that we're able to provide is a new steaming oven for culinary. Building a property is getting a landscape utility vehicle. HVAC, we're going to be having updated student workstations, and automotive collision will be getting a new frame machine. Moving on, we have the FY26 freshman seat allocation. In past years, this has been 325 students. We're going to be incrementally increasing it as a new vocational program has been added. We're going to start this year with 5 new seats to kind of get that program up and running. So it'll be 330 freshmen coming in for FY26. And this is based on town census and school-aged children. Foundation enrollment for Bay Path for Auburn. There's no change from FY25 to FY26. It's 131 students that'll be attending Bay Path from Auburn. And overall, you'll see that there's a difference of 7 kids less attending the school based on enrollment in the sending towns. For statement assessment for Auburn, you have here all 10 towns as well, but for Auburn, the minimum contribution is $1,527,096. Like I said, your foundation enrollment is 131 students. Transportation assessment is $52,994. And the debt service contribution is $226,288 for an overall assessment of $1,806,378. The next page just talks about specifically Auburn. The difference from FY25 to FY26 is an increase in $74,167 or 4.28%, and that's based on the minimum contribution, transportation, and debt service. So the grand totals for the year, again, is based on the three categories: minimum contribution, transportation, and debt service. Our proposed assessment is $13,665,798, with an increase of $733,170 or 5.6% over. Thank you again. Thank you for your support to Bay Path, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, this is always a complicated one, and usually they send a whole team. They've sent you in by yourself tonight,
Well,
so.
we have two other ones tonight, so.
I got two others. Well, thank you for being here, and, but I think, and I'm using this as, we've got a couple new members, so I've been saying through other departments, I ask for explanations on behalf of our new members, but I'm really asking on behalf of myself, even though I should know this by now. But can you just sort of explain Bay Path Regional funding, kind of like big picture sort of, without getting into the numbers, like how does it come to be? It's a little bit different of a budget than other budgets we see before us.
Sure. So it's really, I mean, a lot of it's based on the governor's budget, so that the Chapter 74, obviously, money is allocated. And also, the Chapter 70 money, as we know, follows students. So we don't have that. So we really use our Chapter 74 and Chapter 71 to make up the budget. And those are really numbers that are really formula-driven based on our town's school-age children and the census of the town. So, and then the Chapter 74 that we get, Chapter 70 and 71 comes from the governor, the state budget. That's how we allocate that out.
Questions?
I have a kind of an odd question. It's actually less about the money. Is there any tracking of how many kids actually end up in a vocational career?
Yes and no. So we kind of track three things as kids graduate. We track kids that go into vocation, we track kids that go into military, and then kids who continue on to college. As far as the actual numbers, that's something that we have been asked. Actually, you're the third town this year to ask us that question, so we're going to be putting those metrics more clearly defined in places. But I think that, based on what the trend has been, it's about 50-50 of kids kind of, and I'm talking about vocational versus college age, because the number of kids that go into military isn't obviously equal to the kids that go into vocation or onto college. So we're also, we have our evening program, so we're working with some, like the community colleges now are free tuition, so they have wait lists there, so we've been asked to kind of increase our evening CTI program and career advancement. So those are things that we're trying to look at how we can do that as well, so that, specifically in nursing, healthcare, the wait list at community college is, extensive now because the tuition has been, as across the state, is now free, so. But we have been asked by a number of towns to kind of look at those metrics a little bit more clearly, so we're going to be starting to do that.
I mean, it's, once you lose control of the kids, they can end up anywhere. But, I was just curious.
And there is our vocational department does follow them for at least a year, and a lot of our, we have advisory committees with all the vocations, so they're very involved in the community and kind of see where kids are working and vocations they're actually in. So as also some of our vocations we have do require, if you want to be an engineer, you're not going to go out of Bay Path and become an engineer. You have to go to college to get those kind of degrees. So some of the trades are stepping stones and do require a further degree if you want to go into higher level positions for that.
Additional questions? Anybody? I'm going to ask my regular statements. You were fortunate to sit and listen to the Norfolk agricultural discussion, and I ask every year of representatives of Bay Path. And I'm happy to see that you're, advancing and changing programs based on the needs of society and whatnot, and, diesel vocational programs certainly important. I think this committee would love to see an agricultural program started so that, this year we have, potential of 4 students. You saw the cost behind that. And I don't know how many of us, of the Bay Path member communities are also sending students out of district for those programs.
So that's something that we're talking about right now. If you've been to Bay Path, we're on a hill. So there's not a lot of places to grow to have that agriculture, but we are in preliminary conversations with some community members to try to get some space, something like that, whether it's even, I know Monty Tech has a program where the kids are half academic in that district, and then they do their vocational, so the money stays with the town, and there's some agricultural stuff happening with them. So we're trying to mimic that program as well, to be able to get agriculture is a huge thing. So we're trying to work with some of our community members in Charlton to see if there's any space that we can do that. Right now in Bay Path, there's no place to put an agriculture program. So
Countries all over the world that have grown stuff on the side of mountains for hundreds of years. So I don't think we have anybody for open, but if you have something,
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when I graduated in '86,
we'll let you throw the alumni card in for tonight.
we did have an agricultural, it was FFA, they had that part of it. But it was a good shop, and I don't know why they discontinued it, but it was, it was good. And I was kind of disappointed to hear that we have to truck our kids down to North Fork.
Thank you.
Thank you.
no, we have heard that as well, like we're looking at doing that. So we're trying to meet the needs of our community towns and meet those needs. So we're working on
Yeah,
things.
certainly, we want to support the kids that, want to go those career paths. But
Of course.
it's the transportation costs, and you're dealing with it, but for a small number of students, for the high transportation costs, we certainly would love to see them part of your program, and it's an excellent program. We'd rather see them go into
Bring
Charlton,
that back, sure.
going out of district. Any additional questions on the, Patrick?
I'm going to ask the difficult question I ask every year because I get your spreadsheet at the 11th hour. I do my best to try to do some association, and it escapes me how I can't make one trend work. But your enrollment appears to be down, so we're down about 7 that are beyond freshmen, and in the freshman seats, we're down 2. But you've got communities, Oxford is down 1, Paxton is up 5 from last year, Rutland is down 2, Southbridge, Spencer, and Webster are all up. So the last 3 Webster is down 2 as well. So there is a net change. It does go up 5, but Auburn is removed by 7 because we're down 2 and you're up 5. So what I'm trying to understand is it's almost like per person, our assessment is $70,000 more this year than it was last year. We're down 2 people and you're down 7. There's no way I can look at this and think for a moment, given the demographics, like you said, that there are, it's based on the governor's number and then the community as a whole, how many families and then how many in school. So I just try to understand how, because just for instance, on a simple sheet, your statement of assessments, there's 2 percentage columns of ratios. One of them is to the left, and it's after the foundation enrollment. The other one is to the right, and it's just before debt service. And so it's hard for me to correlate as those numbers fluctuate. It doesn't matter because at the end, as a need for, we'll go to the big number, the 30 million that your budget is this year, invariably we still pay more, even though our enrollment may be decreasing.
Well, this year your enrollment is staying the same.
Right, well, but we're down a couple of people. So that's what I'm trying to understand. You just specifically answered what I was just trying to say. We're down people, but our enrollment stayed the same.
You're down, explain to me, down people?
Well, in other words, we've got less people. We've got 2 less entering in the freshmen, and then in the actual enrollment, I believe we were, there was a sheet that I calculated, and that's what I'm saying. I think what I'll do is, I just I'm just trying to make the point at the moment that I think it's time that we get a little bit more of the methodology and a little bit of a better understanding of what drives some of this, because it's hard when you've got other communities that are starting to accelerate or increase their participants, but yet their numbers don't seem to be increasing, and probably because their communities are smaller. So it's almost like because we're a larger community and because we're sending more students, we're being penalized. Just an observation.
Yeah, I can absolutely, look at that and make sure that the methodology and how we get to that is represented. I mean, a lot of it is driven by census and
Right.
school-age children, so we get those numbers from the state, and then we work off of it that way. So I can also, go back and look at comparison. We also did increase enrollment by 5 students this year, which is not significant. So it's all, out, decimal points out how we get that to that formula, so.
Sure, and I think and if I misspeak, it's only meant to be an example. I'm not stating fact here, it's just speculation. But I know that working with the Norfolk or working with just the Auburn school system, at times we have to ask these very difficult questions and we have to situate and stay within a certain amount. So it begs the question that if I could understand that there was a fixed analysis for your communities and that the budget really fluctuated based on the governor's numbers. So I don't see that happening year after year when I look at this budget and I try to go at it from a, like I could, at one point last night, I think I was into this for 3.5 hours because there was nothing on TV. And I had banged out a lot of small numbers and I just turned around and I said, it's just, I know what I'm trying to say, but I'm not going to be able to prove it with this. And it came down to the fact that there really is sort of a integrated group of numbers. You've got governor's numbers mixed in with town numbers, mixed in with student participation. So it makes it very complex with our minimums and everything else to try to make some kind of fair assessment on whether we feel that we're appropriately contributing to the betterment of the school. So that's one observation I wanted to make. The other one is, I believe we're $20,000 less than our debt service this year. Are we about 10 years into the debt service currently, and there's about 10, 20 years left?
Yep, so the last payment is going to be in 2044,
what I
so
thought.
we're about 90.
20,
And
yep.
so we had a couple of towns that have asked us to kind of project over the next 10 years, and there's every year it's going down, not significantly, but we're paying more towards our principal than our interest at this point in time, so that's going to help that number come down as we move forward as well.
And I believe last year they alluded to another 5 or 10 years that there'll be a borrowing coming? Right. And is that still on track?
That is correct.
Cool, thank you, appreciate it.
Any additional questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Motion to recommend?
Second.
A motion to recommend the Bay Path budget of $1,806,378. You have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you for coming out this evening. Next up, Auburn Public Schools.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're happy to be here. So thank you for having us. Thank you for the ongoing support, and hopefully we can give you a good overview of our budget. I am here with Mrs. Stanek. I think most of you have met her. Mrs. Stanek is our new business manager. She replaced Mrs. Worsbicky. She's been the interim this year. She's done a terrific job. It's not an easy job to step into and get up to speed, but we are very thankful to have her, and already we're in a new position, right? New place with some new things coming in, so that's always a good thing. So as always, we start with our mission, our vision, and our commitment, and I won't go through all this, but I always put it there to display that we do have guideposts that guide us, right? And things that we stick with and things that have been here for some time with us. I know I gave you an executive summary, I think. Did you get the executive summary?
Yes.
So this PowerPoint is very reflective of exactly what's in there so that you're not having to really look back and forth. Again, our strategic plan that has been guiding us for the last several years remains with us, where we're focused on teaching and learning, health, wellness, and safety in our community partnerships. We revisit this regularly. I give updates to the community so that we stay on track with what we say we're going to do. This year, our school committee priorities were, as usual, maintaining appropriate and effective class sizes, a continued focus on anti-bullying initiatives, training and resources, along with social emotional needs of kids. That has not gone away since COVID. We want to maintain those positions that we have supporting those. We have to obviously meet our contractual obligations, and we want to respect the financial support that the town has given us, because throughout my time here in Auburn, both the finance and select board and the townspeople have been very, very supportive. So we're trying to be respectful of all that. I know that initially you had received a budget increase of a budget from us that reflected a 4.3% increase. I believe tonight before you should have one that is a 3.81% increase. I want to back up one more step, because the budget that we initially submitted to the town in January was a 5.7% increase. And the reason for that budget came through with basically maintaining our staffing as it was. You will see a little further on, we are adding 2 positions that are required because of the special education needs of our students. We basically level funded our, all supplies and all of that kind of thing. But realizing that 5.7 wasn't viable, and we had to find some ways to bring that down. Over the time between the 5.7 and the 4.3, we did find out that we had gotten some additional EL reimbursement money. I know I had spoken to you about this previously. We received for our students that we call newly arrived. They're not newly arrived anymore, but that we did receive reimbursement of $104.89 per day per student. And so we received some of that, and I'm going to talk in a little bit about how our understanding at one point, not that long ago, was that that funding was going to end in December. We have since received information that the funding will continue. The funding will continue, but certainly not at the level that you'll see in a few minutes, because, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the shelter's going to be closing. And so families are moving out, and therefore the amount of funding will decrease. So I'll talk a little bit more specifically about that in a few moments. But that was something unexpected. We did not believe that the funding was going to go beyond this past December, and that was going to impact this budget. But we have found out differently since. So getting back to the 4.3 that you initially received from us down to the 3.81, there were 2 really key things that helped us to move that number down, and that was done at the request of town leadership. Based on the overall town budget, they felt that this was the amount that we could bring forward, that they could bring forward as a total town budget, without having to look at a 2.5 override or looking at excess levy or any of that. So we have done what the town has asked us to do. And so in the interim, we did receive a resignation of a teacher who was out on leave. We will not be filling that position. We have another elementary position that will not be filled for next school year, so that results in $139,796 of savings, and some additional EL reimbursement. Part of that, the $15,570, we've added in as an additional offset for special education in-town transportation. So that's the money that kind of comprised the move from 4.3 to 3.81. It is a little bit more complex than that, given that we're probably getting, it's an estimate, maybe another $70,000 in that EL reimbursement, maybe $80,000. It's all going to depend on how long these students stay with us. And so you'll see there's a little bit of a change in our amount of our offsets. But given that, even though the shelter is closing, if those students are moved to another shelter which is possible that they get moved to another shelter versus more permanent housing, they may still have the right to attend school with us, and we have to maintain the staffing to support them. So that's where some of that additional EL money is going. So it's helping us a little bit, not as much as it could have if everyone was being moved to permanent housing. But I will tell you again, that is a moving target, as it has been since 2 Augusts ago when this all began. Every couple of weeks, the situation changes, and we're just trying to respond as well, as best we can with what we know. So we've adjusted our staffing levels to meet this budget, obviously, and to continue to meet the needs of our students. Overall, there are 2 positions we're not filling. One I just mentioned for an elementary teacher who resigned, and one is a science teacher who will be out on leave. We may have to have internal staff cover a couple of science sections, but it'll be much, much less expensive than fully funding that science position, and we think we can do that for 1 year. There are 2 additional placeholders that we have had in this budget since the beginning, one at the middle school and one at the elementary school. We're waiting on our enrollment. I don't know if you remember, but last year, we've always had 4 kindergartens at Bryn Mawr and 4 at Packagug. This year, we only have 3 at Bryn Mawr, and that was based on our enrollment. We only needed 3. So we're waiting for some of those numbers to shake out to see where we actually apply those, not filling those positions. And we did have to add 2 new positions. So a special education teacher at Swanson Road and a district-wide speech and language pathologist. This is, again, to meet the required minutes from our students' individual educational programs. As we always do, our October 1st student enrollment were used overall. Our Chapter 70 funding, we only saw a 1% increase, which was about, I want to say, $220,000, something like that, around $200,000. That's markedly different than what we had seen over the past 5 or 6 years, where we would see 7 or 8% increases. Our special education circuit breaker is conservatively estimated at 70%. We've projected Medicaid reimbursement at $160,000, and for this budget, we're applying $257,916 from the EL reimbursement that I was just discussing, that $104 a day. But the caveat with this is that money won't be here for our next budget. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to consider for the FY27 budget cycle. We have level funded our grant monies, the 240 grant, the Title I, Title IIA. We also get Title III and Title IV. We're going to wait and see what happens with the federal grants. My hope is that they stay. It would be devastating to Auburn if the federal entitlement grants didn't come through as expected, and Auburn would be no different than any other community in Massachusetts if that were the case. I think, what did we say for a total, right, for our overall grants, federal grants?
It's close to $1 million of offsets in the budget.
I'm sorry, 1 million, you said?
1 million, yep. It's this year it was $986,019.
So that would be a devastating impact if for some reason we weren't to get that funding, but time will tell. We level funded our supplies. Our bus application, we did up our offset from our bus, the fees that we collect to $120,000. It's normally about $100,000, but we did increase the fee that we charge our families by $25 for this coming year. So that's where we got the additional $20,000. We continue to heavily use our revolving accounts, whether that's the rentals, Satellite and Galaxy, music, preschool, athletics, and our tuition revolving accounts. And at this point, we're budgeting for about 74 school choice slots for the coming year. So right around where we are this year. And again, that's only for middle school and high school. Last year at this time, we were talking about our transportation bid with AA Transportation with a lot of trepidation. It came in at a 9% increase, and Mrs. Stanek worked with AA to bring that down to 8%, which is a good amount of savings. So that was a little bit of a relief, as you can imagine. There are many communities that are looking at 13, 15, 16% increases in transportation. As advised, we've anticipated a 5% increase in our special education private schools tuition, which is from the state sends us what we should estimate for that. Our contractual obligations for staff are noted in the budget. I won't go through the oil, electricity, and natural gas. Nothing's really changed there from last year because we're still in the contracts with the town for that. We continue to use what we get for our solar credits, and so for this budget, we have projected offsets of $4,017,685.93. Yep,
Do you have the utility piece of AMS in there?
yeah, later, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So again, we've been notified that the shelter that we have here in town will be closing. At its peak, we had 54 students that were enrolled from the shelter, so that will, I think right now, we're at about 44, the last count I heard, but that changes on the daily. The other thing that we don't know about is student enrollment due to topograph, that's the housing development up off of Albert Street. That's the name I cannot remember, so I had to put it in here because I can't it doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what it's called, is topograph. Actually, when I typed this out, there were 19 students. As of today, we have 22, so there were 3 additional. Now, at the time that the study was done, they had said we could see about 69 students enrolled, but I think at this point, last I heard, there were 4 buildings open. There are additional left to open. So the number of 22 doesn't seem so much, but I guess we could end up at 69 however things go. I do hear that the units are somewhat expensive, so I don't know that they're seeing the enrollment of families that they anticipated, but time will tell. This year, unfortunately, we are also accounting for 2 residential placements. So, I had I went before Select Board. Last August, we had a student enroll who was already placed in a residential placement, and because he came from another state, the tuition fell on us. So had that student come from another town in Massachusetts, it would have been a cost share for the first year, but because they're out of state, that became our responsibility. So we have used special education stabilization to offset that tuition for this year. And as of the end of this year, there'll be a second student in a residential placement. They are extremely expensive, extremely expensive. We do everything we can to not have that happen. One of the students, we are looking to, my Director of Pupil Services is working with the family and with the school to see if the student may be eligible to step down to an out-of-district placement versus a residential placement, which would be a substantial savings. But we've had to account for it because we won't know that until probably like mid-June, if there's any chance of that child stepping down. Electricity credits from the building project at Auburn Middle School are going to expire this year, so that's going to impact us a bit next year. We've accounted for that. I wanted you to know that we are designated now as a community eligibility provision, which again is an odd name for this. But what this means is, so it means that all of our kids qualify for free lunch. And this gets confusing because the state of Massachusetts provides universal free lunch. This is free lunch as it's recognized through the federal government. And so that rate was always about 40%. Auburn we've always been like 31, 32, 33% for kids that would qualify for free and reduced. Well, in the last year and a half, they lowered the percentage from 40 to 25, which now meant that all of our kids are free no matter what in the eyes of the federal government. But what that also means is that we cannot charge any of those. So more of our kids have qualified through this, right? Because now it's a 25% threshold versus what it was. And so we can't charge them a bus fee, understandably, any kind of field trip fees, exam fees, Satellite and Galaxy. We have to give them consideration for that. And I think we've already seen the impact. So last year, we increased our preschool tuition, and our income from our preschool tuition has remained relatively flat because of so many more people qualified for the sliding fee scale. So we have people that are out there that are hurting, and understandably, some of that's trickling to us with the few things that we do charge for do get impacted by that. So final thoughts. Our budget is $32,687,276. That's a $1.2 million increase over last year's budget. I've already noted that the offsets are a little over $4 million, which equates to a 3.81% increase over last year. And as always, I just want to say how grateful we are for your ongoing support, the collaboration with the town, the support from the select board, and certainly town meeting members and the town in general. And I just always want to end with that quote, right? History will judge us by the difference we make in the everyday lives of children. And the work you do here makes that difference. So thank you, and we'll entertain any questions you may have.
Questions? Patrick?
Thank you. That's, as always, a great presentation. You answered my questions while you were presenting, but I wanted to dive in a little bit more for concern and trying to get ahead of it. You mentioned the entitlement grant for almost $1 million with the federal government. You commented on the free lunch program. I just want to be transparent in case things do shift, because we know at the federal level, the Department of Education's come across in conversation. So I'm just curious if you can just tell me if there's other federal grants that, though might be smaller, do you have an idea, an average, like 20 grants, or is it just one or two grants that are really completely federally funded at this point, or are there others? I'm just
Jen
trying
can
to,
address that with what we currently get, you mean?
right,
Yes.
just a number of.
What we had gotten in FY '25, what happens is like there's one that is the umbrella. So there's two grants that lie under one of them, which
Yep.
is our 240 and our 262, which are for our special education. And then altogether, there is 4 other grants that are under this one umbrella that are for low income. They pay for our mentoring for our teachers. They pay for family engagement and also English learners as well in those families.
So total of 2 big ones with subsets, so really 6.
Yeah,
kind
about 6 of them.
Like the
That
first 2 focused on special education.
Grand total is 1 million.
The grand total of all of those together is just about 1 million,
Okay, so it's not just the first 2, it's all 6.
all 6.
Just to be so as I'm paying attention to what's going on out in the real world, I can get a sense of, the only other question I was going to ask you was about your utility credits. So like I said, you covered everything I was going to ask. So thank you.
Just going, sort of following that up, how does the federal Department of Education affect you? I mean, obviously, I guess there's $1 million that's on the table. Is there any, how else does it affect you in terms of operationally?
Operationally, you know, I know there's been a lot of talk about curriculum, right? That we get our curriculum from the Department of Education. We do not get our curriculum from the Federal Department of Education. Our state standards dictate what we teach to our students, as well as the community, right? Our teachers contribute to, we're hoping to buy a new math curriculum, and that was a decision by our teachers and our administrators on what works. Other than the federal entitlement grants that are administered by the Department of Education, there's not a whole lot of direct result, except that they do dictate things like what's required for some teacher preparation programs. And I think there's going to be a withdrawal on some of those things related to diversity and cultural competence, as we've seen in the news. So that's going to impact down the road, I think, some of the candidates we may receive and the educational experience they have when we hire new teachers. But directly, you know, they do a lot with federal student loans, right? So that's a big part of what that Department of Education does. That's not going to necessarily impact us directly. It may impact some of our staff who may be trying to apply for loan forgiveness, because we've had many, many teachers who have received loan forgiveness in the last 2 years, because we have to sign off on their employment and all of that. That's going to be impacted, I'm sure. But the primary thing is going to be, if this funding were to be taken away, it would have a significant impact on us, particularly our special education students. It would be devastating.
So my question's relative to, so we've had discussions over the past years. I've asked about school choice, and I think we have maybe a little bit difference of philosophies on that, only because we know the cost per student is significantly higher than what the state allows you to charge people coming in for school choice. The good thing is that the school system is doing an outstanding job, therefore people want to send their children this way. So kudos to you and your entire staff and the school committee for, for that. But my other question sort of is, well, I guess I may have missed the number of students utilizing school choice?
This year, we have 78. Next year, for this budget, will be probably 74.
And that is only for middle and high
Middle
school?
and high school.
Middle and high school.
Yeah.
The other part is there a mechanism by which we ensure that the students that are coming through town are truly residents of the town, if they're not either school choice or residents? I know there's some sort of, I think of, in the many forms you fill out in those early days of school year, I think there is some sort of attestation that you were a resident or full-time resident of the town. Is there any mechanism to ensure that we're
I will tell you,
verifying that?
you would be shocked to know how much time I spend on residency. Shocked, along with the building principals. What we did build in is 2 years ago, we built in residency checkpoints, because before that, once you enrolled in the schools, whether that was in preschool or in 8th grade, no one ever asked you for your residency paperwork again. So now we have a returning student registration through Power School. So if you're going into kindergarten, even if you're in our preschool, so into kindergarten, into 3rd grade, 6th grade, and again in 9th grade. So all of our big transitions, everyone has to fill out the returning student registration, but at those, we call them gate posts, they have to provide updated residency paperwork, which goes along with what our school committee policy notes. So it's an updated lease or mortgage, a utility bill, things that can really tie folks to a residence, right? At one point, I think we still had on a phone bill, but, phone bills now don't mean it's your house phone, so we've updated that. So we do that. What we also do is, if a principal suspects that someone may not live there, there's a conversation with the family. If the family still says, no, I really do, I live in Auburn, then it gets up to my office. They'll get a letter, sometimes they come in for a meeting. We ask for additional documentation. Unfortunately, sometimes it's really hard to prove. But we make great effort to do it, and there are many times that a family will say, okay, yes, I have to go and register in Millbury, or I have to register wherever I'm living. So it is an uphill battle, but one that we fight all the time.
Glad to hear that those checks and balances are at least being attempted
Yes.
to keep people honest. And again, it's not a good problem to have financially, but it's a good problem to have in that folks want to send their kids to the Auburn Public Schools.
It is, and I will tell you, it's some of the most heartbreaking conversations I've had with some of our families. It's terrible, and I say, it isn't me. It's legal. This is legally, you cannot attend here if you don't live here. So, I said, I'll often say, you can't ask me to break the law, right? I can't do that. But it's heartbreaking sometimes, because they are very tied to Auburn and to the community and to the schools and to the teachers. But nonetheless, right, we have to financially reserve what we can for our kids.
Would they not be eligible for school choice?
So it depends. So if they're in the elementary school, they are not. But school choice is also a lottery. So that's the other thing. People say, well, I'm moving to Worcester next year. Can my child stay in 9th grade? Well, first of all, you have to be a student in Worcester. So that then, because that's how we get our funding, right? We get our funding now because you're a Worcester student coming to Auburn. So you have to enroll there first. So then that takes a year. We get a whole list of kids who come in, and based on what the school committee approves for positions, it's then a lottery. So we can't say, oh, we're going to pick Joey because Joey used to be our student and we know he's a nice kid. It's a lottery for those positions after that.
So the 78 is kind of somewhat fixed. Like,
Well,
we might
that's-
lose some, but we can always take,
Yeah, and that seems to be a number that works for us based on our overall enrollment, because that's what we look at. Every year, the school committee approves how many openings we're going to have based on our Auburn kids' enrollment, right? So if we have a grade level, like right now, I think we have 8th grade that has 220 kids in it. We don't have any school choice kids there. We never took any because it's been this big class that's kind of gone along the way. So we didn't want to add to that to burden that grade level of kids. So it changes every year when we look at that with where we think it won't have a negative impact on our students.
some towns, cities mostly, are having lots of conflict, I don't know what the right word is, with charter schools. Do we have any of that do we have any charter school draws that are taking kids away?
I haven't looked at our school attending report in a little bit. I'm sure we have some students that attend charter schools. I don't think it's a big draw, though. It's not a big pull. Some of the private schools more, and certainly Bay Path, because they offer something completely different than Auburn, that we can offer.
How does it work with like Mass Academy? And there's another mathematics school, I think, in Marlboro. But those are public schools, so does that just fall under school choice, or how does that?
Yeah, I think there's an application process, yes. I do think that's how that goes. Yep.
Do we have any kids school choicing out of Auburn?
I suspect we do.
We wouldn't know.
Not many.
Not many.
No.
Just a follow-up question on the shelters closing. And previously, the state was paying us $104,
$489
$489
per child per day.
per child per day, which is a significant amount of money compared to what if a resident, the costs would be. It's a lot of money. So that money went above and beyond the cost to educate those students. Are we going to see an impact? Those monies were probably, couldn't all go to that one student is what I'm trying to say. So they were utilized in other places to offset things, I imagine.
They were, except that we did have to hire staff because our EL population went up by 50 students, and there's a certain required number of minutes that students require per the Department of Ed. So we had to hire staff for that. We had to purchase iPads for all of them. There were other EL instructional materials. We needed more of those. We offered some things out of the school day. That was an additional amount. We were allowed to use some of it to offset transportation, right? About 50 kids. That's really about a bus load. So we did use some of it to offset that. But it was somewhat proportional, but it was really helpful. It was really helpful. It would have been very difficult without.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to see an impact in this coming year when we don't see the students, that funds that would have been utilized that sort of bled over to other initiatives that we were going to now have to supplement.
No, but I will tell you, I mean, it really has impacted, right? We didn't necessarily add a bus, but we were able to use some of that money for our transportation because our buses were much more full than they were ever before. So not this coming year, 26, but in FY '27, we could see an impact on that. Now, the other thing I can say about '27 is I think already we have 6 or 7 teachers retiring.
Retirements.
So that's going to some degree, work in our benefit because we either don't fill one if we don't need it, or we hire someone at a much lower salary. So we see significant savings there. So I think that may be somewhat of a wash when we're no longer getting that funding.
Andrew?
Just to follow that up, so obviously, I know you split some of that money across different line items to cover different expenses, but I wouldn't say we have a very robust EL portion of the budget in terms of what it is. It's a small portion of our budget as is. So if that money goes away, you talked about resignations and maybe losing people. Can we afford to lose EL teachers or move them around or shuffle them in the future? Is that something that you foresee?
Potentially. I will say that even without the shelter, our EL population it continues to grow incrementally, Could I see a shuffle maybe next year when we have a significant drop right now? Maybe. But that's what's going to be funded with some of the remaining funds that we'll get for the remainder of this school year, because as I said, that's going to continue this year.
Yeah, I just wonder, I don't think EL is going down. It doesn't seem that way. It seems like it's only going to be continuing to go up, maybe not to the 50 students that are going out. Maybe it's more balanced at that point. Another question, forgive my ignorance because I'm new to this committee. Lot of to be negotiated, is that union contracts? I don't understand some of that. So.
Yeah, so typically what you'll see in there that's to be negotiated are all of the administrators' contracts, which are typically looked at year to year. All of the unions and bargaining groups, those are all reflected with their increases. We also have some folks that For instance, the people that are paid out of the Title I grant, right? We hire some math tutors for that. They're on year-to-year contracts, and so we don't typically reflect in the new budget until we get to that. We keep some in like a salary reserve line for that.
You brought up busing. Where are we in terms of our busing contracts?
So I just successfully signed a 3-year contract with AA, our first year increase, and we had originally budgeted for 10%, but they came in at 9, and I was able to get it for 8% for next year. So, 3 years.
I'll tell you, that we were sweating that one out. We really
Yes.
were, so.
I know we obviously have a vastly different scale, but Worcester has seemingly had a lot of success with bringing busing in-house. Like, I don't even know if that's a question for you or Dory or like town meeting, but like,
Actually, that so I belong to the Massachusetts Association of School Business Officers, and actually the Assabet Valley and that smaller group, they are talking about those things, but talking to some of them, then you're paying employees, you're also paying benefits for those employees. The electric vehicles are extremely expensive because we've had presentations for other districts that have brought them in. Worcester has been used as an example too. And then the other piece is staffing, and when staffing calls out and how you do that. So we were just discussing that is a huge undertaking. I don't think that we're anywhere near that. We currently
3 years.
I will say a town near where I live have their own buses. And the bus drivers, they have half the number of drivers that they, compared to the number of buses that they need. So the drivers pick up half the students, they sit in the cafeteria, and they go out and they pick up the other half of the kids and bring them. And I can't even, it gives me anxiety thinking about all those kids in the cafeteria as a building principal, former building principal. It's really, the staffing is the difficult part. And now, some of these companies, like AA, they're driving up what they're paying drivers. So municipalities find it much more difficult to be competitive with that. So my brother-in-law drove bus in one of the towns near us, and he said they were losing drivers left and right to places like AA because they paid better.
Just to build upon Michael's, have you looked at the possibility of at least the sports teams or activities being brought in-house with more of the, you have at least one of the white vans, 16-passenger van-type vehicles, that can be driven by coaches or staff members. Has that been a consideration?
Yes, and we use our 2 multi-function buses at this time for our smaller teams as well. So, we haven't, that would be a big capital expense to come and ask for a vehicle. So, that big expense you put out. And some of the towns are doing some cost analysis on that, and I will be watching that in my groups. But that it is a very big undertaking. It may take time to make any savings for that, just because of the expense you put out up front.
My last question is going to be, and you brought up the special education. It's been a few years since that account was established, the special education stabilization account. Can you just give us an update on where we are in terms of balances in that account and what that account was established for? It sounds like the cases we're dealing with is a good case point as to why we established it.
Right, so off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the balance is, but we have had to tap it this year due to the student that came in that is a residential student. So we did go to, went to the select board and asked for that appropriation. I want to say at the beginning of the year before we had tapped it, it was around 800,000. And so we come each quarter because we don't, and for some reason, if he is able to step down or he were to move back out of state. So I think right now, and I don't know if,
I want to say we're around 550.
I think we were at like 500,000 the last time I did the balances.
I forget the plan on that one. Was it for all expenditures that had to go through the select board, or was it up if it was anything over a certain amount? I forget what the policy was on that one.
I don't think,
think
it's
it's
my
any-
understanding that anytime we're going to tap it, we go to select board, if we're going to
Yes.
use those funds for anything. So we have done it quarterly, just in case there was a change in the situation with this student that we didn't ask for all the money up front. And select board has been great about that, and we hope at some point we can replenish that, given however things end up. We have budgeted for this, for the full tuition for this student. If he steps down, whether at the start of the year or mid-year, that would impact what we would need for tuition, so.
I forget if this is on yourselves or Karen, what's our yearly contribution towards that account? Do we have a yearly contribution that comes out, or do we put money in and we let it?
Yeah, and I think when when things have arisen, so for instance, the example I just gave, if this student stays in residential halfway through next school year, now we've budgeted for a full year of tuition, right? If he doesn't stay there, I think the conversation with the town would be, so should the remaining portion that we put aside for his tuition be put back into stabilization? Because that was the reason we tapped it in the first place. Does that make sense?
I'm just wondering, is that something we'll see in the future as a warrant article to take money to replenish that account if it's been utilized over the last couple of years in order to get it back to a reasonable account that we could tap into as needed? But
It could be, it is still very healthy. It is still very, very healthy.
thank you.
I just, we typically vote on capital at the end, but you guys have a not insignificant portion of the capital improvement plan budget. So it looks like there have been some changes, and I just wanted to ask essentially if we could get like a brief explanation. It seems like the initial bulk of it was towards building rehab, but that's been reduced by 210. And equipment's gone up by 210, but that's also like a shifting. Initially, there was 115,000 for, I'm assuming tech furniture and equipment, and that's been zeroed out for a new K through 8 math program. So mostly like anytime I see a number go from $115,000 to zero, I get nervous. Like, is our equipment that would have been replacing still in serviceable condition? Or these things that we're going to just push off to next year? We do have some backup, and I will fully admit that I
So
have.
you're looking at the FY '26, so the building rehab, you mean, right?
Yeah, so
Yes,
Bill,
So the reason that we were able to do that, and I don't know to what degree you're aware, but Joe Fahey.
not at all.
Okay. So Mr. Fahey, who retired from us as the Director of Facilities, has been working with the town around some major HVAC improvements using ARPA money. And so part of that is also benefiting the school, and that 210 is part of that project. So therefore, that seemed like a place where we could repurpose that funding for
makes a
that
lot of
reason.
sense.
So that is still going to happen, but it's part of a separate project.
And is the updated math program, that's like a curriculum?
It is.
I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but we call that capital improvements?
Well, this was working with Mr. Kazanovich. We knew we were heading into a very, and Ed's not here, so I guess I can blame him, right?
Absolutely. Please do.
We're going out shortly if you don't do it, so.
We knew we were heading into a very difficult budget season. But what we also knew was the math program that we had, there were some things, parts of it that we could no longer get because we were already going on year 8, which is a long time for a math program. And the ones that we could get, we were still going to be putting out close to $70,000 for materials for an old program. So in that conversation, this is where we arrived. We've been talking about this since the beginning of the school year. How can we possibly do this? Because it's over $400,000 for a new curriculum. Now, it's unusual this year. We're purchasing one K to 8. Normally, we do K to 5, which obviously would be less, and then separately grades 6 through 8. But the math team, the math teachers really felt like it's important that we bring a consistency through that, and we feel like we'll get a bit more bang for our buck that way.
Andrew, do you have a question on this one? Or?
Just going back to the school, so, I mean, obviously, we've got a relatively new high school, a brand-new middle school. The other 3 schools, though, are concerning to me and their age. If you could kind of speak to that a little bit. I mean, we're looking at a fire station, we're doing a 2.5 increase. Obviously, the town is in a tough spot in terms of some of the taxation. So the schools that are older, I know some of them are almost 100 years old. So
So as the longtime principal at Bryn Mawr School, I was there for 10 years. Bryn Mawr is an older school. Mr. Fahey and now Mr. Gregoire, our new director of facilities, they've done a tremendous job with keeping up our buildings. I know I have some families say the buildings are so old, and I say, well, the building needs to be safe, it needs to be healthy, and it needs to be functional, right? You can't have little tiny rooms with kids in them. You need to have classrooms. Whether it's Bryn Mawr or Packagug or Swanson Road, we still have that. Now, that takes an enormous amount of effort by our custodial team and our facilities team. They do an amazing job, along with our technology team. When I first came to Bryn Mawr, if it rained, we had no internet. That was a given. Just forget about it. There was no internet if it rained, and we still have that joke sometime. Now, that was 14 years ago. We've come a long way, right? So even our technology folks have made it so that our internet is up to speed. You know, all of our kids have access to iPads. Our technology is solid. So, you know, would it seem like in the future, we're going to need a new school? We are. But we consider, too, we're part of the team. And the fire department is, you know, they've been working on this for a long time. And it's
Also in a school.
Sure.
They made it through
Yeah,
the high
they're also-
school and the
Yeah,
Correct, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, I know.
So, you know,
station and.
it's their time up at bat, because we do have a beautiful high school and a beautiful middle school. But will that have to be a conversation? It will, at some point, but not right now. Our schools are very functional, and they are certainly safe and well-maintained.
I just wanted to acknowledge that at a time when everybody, you know, is quick to rebuild or throw away, that it was really refreshing to hear you give accolades to your, your facility, the people that manage them all, because they do have to be upkeep. You can't just kick something to the curb and watch it fall apart and then expect to replace it a few years later. The more you maintain it and the more we maintain our community, the more use we'll get out of stuff. And sometimes you don't judge a book by its cover, but in this particular case, I think those buildings have a lot of good in them. And that's.
And
I would say, as the longtime Packagug principal, which is a very, you know, people would say it's a very old building. It is, but it is so well maintained. I mean, the hardwood floors in the original part of the building are just amazing. And just in the time that I was the principal, which was 9 years, I had a new roof, I had new boilers, they did a new system. So all of us, the town, works together to maintain those buildings and maintain them well. So we are blessed. So we would not take from that maintenance of our buildings, because we know how important that is.
Yeah, I'm just going to, and this is more of a school committee thing, but relative to the curriculum, and if, for the life of me, I have trouble wrapping my head around new curriculums for math, which is largely the same math we've done for 100 years. And I understand, you know, the books and the lesson plans, but it also goes to new training for staff, because I won't mention the corporation's name that largely manages most curriculums across the country. But they do. They're salespeople, and they sell this stuff, and they change things a little bit here and there. But the fact that you've gone 8 years on the previous one, but aren't we largely, I feel like largely before when we did different curriculums, it was because we needed new textbooks, which needed new workbooks, which needed new, largely now, most of this curriculum is being delivered via technology. Am I correct? Is that
Yes and no.
certain grade, I guess certain grade levels, right? I guess we're not,
Not for all. So even, you know, there's a technology component, right? There's a lot more that a teacher will have for resources that are online. And some of the practice for some kids is done on a computer. But we still have good old pencil and paper, and I will tell you, of late, we're talking more and more about the need to bring some of that back more regularly, that the amount of screen time that our kids are getting is just, you know, we're contributing to that too, right? So they're on their iPad at school, they go home, they're on their phone, then they're watching TV or whatever it is. And so we've had a lot of conversations about the importance of putting a pencil to a piece of paper to do some of that. And obviously, we still do some of it, so don't misunderstand. But we do want to try and strike a better balance between technology and those kind of experiences. So, and these programs still come with all of that. You know, they still come with manipulative kits and things that kids can build and make and try and do that way. So we don't want to take that away from kids. So yes, it is largely online, but we need to give our kids some other experiences too.
Some of that also, if I can interject, is like subscriptions cost a hefty amount of money as well. And that gives our teachers access to a lot of information, programs, curriculum ideas and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that also goes into that high cost. And they wouldn't have access to any of that information if we didn't subscribe to their programs. So they kind of have us.
Thank you. I guess I sympathize with the parents that just maybe possibly just figured out what everyday math really meant. And now you're going to move to something else, because I know when I did it with my kids, they would say, this is the way I was taught, and I'd scratch my head and I'd try and look back and then have to show them the way I was taught how to do it, and then we'd somewhere find in the middle to find the answers. But I don't know what the new curriculum is going to look like, but there'll be a whole new generation of young parents trying to scratch
We
their
can't
heads.
help past fifth grade anyways. It's no big deal. We can't help past fifth grade anyways. My fifth grader, I can't help him.
You know, a lot of it is AI advancement too, so these new programs will also have, you know, that component.
Andy?
Sorry, I just have one more. Back to the budget. I have one line item, and this might be budgeting for me. Other miscellaneous really bothers me in a budget, just that's my personal issue. But the other contractual obligation longevity, that's probably the largest increase I found in the budget. Could you just explain that? Just again, I don't really know your budget well.
So part of that does hold, so all of our bargaining groups, to one degree or another, have longevity in their contracts. So longevity stipend. It is new in the teacher's contract for next year.
Okay, that's why that's such a big increase. Okay, thank you very much.
And just, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just for our new members, this budget in detail has been reviewed by the school committee and then presented to us. So it's a bit of a formality, but certainly we would be able to make our own recommendations. You know, the school committee has looked at it in detail, line by line. So
Many times this year.
They've also worked with town management and so forth. I'd like to move this and make a motion to recommend the town manager's $32,687,276.
okay, we have a motion to recommend and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Both.
Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mrs. Harrington, for representing tonight and coming out on your own time.
I don't do mics, so.
That's the last budget for this evening. We had some minutes that we were presented. If nobody has any questions, we'll consider those to be accepted. We have for our upcoming meeting, tentatively, we have the DPW, the Youth Commission, and it was a request to put on a discussion relative to whether we continue to have the remote dial-in option for meetings. And I guess we did ask the last meeting if you could, any guidelines relative to that, relative to changes legislatively, anything that we should know as we further that discussion on that next meeting would be appreciated. Anybody else, anything we want on the agenda for the next meeting, or? I'm sorry, we, and the CIP, we want to,
Want to add the CIP?
we want the CIP as well, so we can, in theory, hopefully not have to meet on the 9th.
And also, just to remind everyone that there is a chance that when we do have our next meeting, that we may have to meet before town meeting. So just for the new members, sometimes things come up just before, and we have to meet then. So
Town meeting is scheduled for,
May 20th, Tuesday, no?
May, is it the 5th, 6th?
6th, I believe.
It's early.
Okay. I thought I saw, no, I'm glad that May 6th, okay.
Town meeting is always before election.
Oh, no, I understand that, but I saw, I just went off something I thought I saw. So that's why I quoted from a date that I thought I
Tuesday.
saw.
Whatever that Tuesday date is. Yeah, I can check. We'll check.
Was there structure, didn't you have a structural question last week, or we sorted out?
Next week.
Oh, okay, okay.
Tuesday, May 6th.
Motion to adjourn.
a motion to adjourn,
Second.
and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Very good.